Or gas politics. I always have to do the charts and graphs section. Although we'll rip through it pretty quickly with natural gas. It won't be a long 15-minute video like we saw in some other cases. So first of all, I've used the term gas revolution. I've thrown that around a lot, and we've actually hinted at it, and we've looked at it in a very real way, right? So we've talked about moving away from coal and moving to natural gas. And I've also hinted at the reason we have this thing called the gas revolution is technological advancement, right? We started hydrofracking, really, and coal bed methane and some other ways to recover gas, and we've realized that now we have an abundant and fairly cheap and also fairly self-reliant power source. So we've really started to exploit these unconventional reservoirs of natural gas. So you can see here, this is gas collected as of 2015, right? So again, most of these graphs are publications, so you're out a couple of years. But what we see in this graph is, notice that essentially that red line, that's conventional natural gas, right? So that's related to oil extraction. If you notice, it doesn't really change all that much because the level of oil extraction is fluctuated, but not significant. Below that, there's a thin little black line that represents coal bed methane. So again, not really fueling the revolution, but the revolution should be very, very obvious looking at this graph, and it's in the upper green portion, right? That's the shale gas, tight shale. That's the hydrofracking application that we've been talking about. And if you look at gas production, it just takes off. And that projection is not expected to change very much going into the future. Again, really kind of getting away from coal and going to natural gas. And again, I've said this a whole bunch of times now, it's not necessarily such a clear-cut choice as to which one is better, right? They really both have their pros and cons. And so it's kind of up to you to weigh that. And we'll actually have a little video about fracking that you've probably already watched it. It's a third-party YouTube video that I shared, and they introduce, the pros and cons, right? How do we weigh coal against natural gas? I've also talked about some specific and at least famous to me or famous to geoscientists shale units that are these big natural gas reservoirs. So this diagram has production from some of these really famous shale formations, and going back to 2000, really since then this gas revolution has taken off. So notable ones, if you look here, we see the biggest spikes, right? The Barnett Shale, the Haynesville Shale, the Marcellus Shale is shown in blue. So the Marcellus Shale, I believe, is like upstate New York. We've talked about the Bakken, right? The Bakken is shown here in red. That's kind of in the Dakotas area. And really for the last 15 years, I'm not sure how much information you guys have looked into this. Those are like oil boom towns, right? They're kind of like what a mining boom town was, maybe Idaho City 150 years ago. Some of these oil towns in the Bakken and the Marcellus Shale basins are just filled with people, right? And trailers and just workers are coming and they're trying to struggle with ways to keep everyone in place. They're also installing pipelines to get this stuff brought out of there, which has also been in the news. But it should be pretty apparent from these figures that our production is just exploded, and that fundamentally is getting us off of coal. Actually, was chatting with a student who was interested in this yesterday for a different purpose, and we were talking about comparing coal to natural gas. He said, well, it's kind of like quitting smoking but starting to vape, right? So they're both not so awesome, but I think if you asked your doctor and you said, I'm going to do one of these two things, the answer is pretty clear which one's probably better. I don't know if that's a reasonable comparison, but it made me laugh. Okay, so a couple more diagrams that we're going to look at. Again, we've really just looked at the U.S. situation. It's worth our time to back out and look at the global scene. And so we've talked about the natural gas revolution in the U.S. Interestingly, it's not part of this global trend of national gas revolution, although there is increased natural gas production all over the world. we are actually really leading the charge in that case. So you can see here, this is a 2011 diagram, recoverable natural gas. And again, it's got these nice circles. Notice that Russia has tons of available natural gas that's associated generally with petroleum, right? So notice that it's shaded in blue, which is, if you look down at the key, that's conventional gas, right? The stuff that comes off of the oil. Some oil has a higher percentage of gas than others, right? So some are actually a great gas resource and not so great oil. But if you look at the U.S., ours is about half and half, right? So we've got our oil extraction that we do in Texas and various places around the world, mostly Midwest and things like that. But there's also a significant portion of unconventional gas, and that's what's really been driving the revolution. And then you can see, beyond that, it drops off pretty quickly, although, significant over in China as well, significant increase in natural gas use. And again, it's always important to talk about reserves versus production. So again, here's another image showing the different reserve levels, right? So how much natural gas each country has, or each region has. But then what really matters, at least for the price on the market, in a scale that's meaningful to you, is who's selling, right? And so you can see here, this is how much gas is being recovered from these areas. And it's significant, right? So Russia, Canada, us, right? We're all really kind of leading the charge. Some of the countries in the Middle East. But again, that's the oil that's the gas that goes on the market. And then the last thing, we've already seen this, so we're just revisiting this diagram. This is the changing power mix, right? So this is the megawatts that are scheduled to go offline versus the new megawatts that we have scheduled to come online for our national power grid. And again, it's rehashing what we're talking about. So about 40,000 watts going offline. Most of that is coal. There are some others, and one really big reason why you would take power offline is upkeep and maintenance, right? So if you have a power plant that's 40 or 50 years old, your permitting runs out. You need to do all of these kind of mitigation, projects and fix things and upgrade things. And sometimes it's just cheaper to fold your cards and shut that plant down. But if you're going to open a new one, you probably want to use a fuel source that has a better future, right? So again, we think back to that projection of what we're going to see for natural gas production. That line is expected to rise, and so if you are an energy company and you're going to build a new power plant, the betting man would build one that would burn natural gas. If you hell bent on building one that's going to use a fossil fuel, right? So natural gas. It's easier to get. You don't have to deal with coal ash. You can just run it by a pipe. So again, for a lot of reasons, not just financially, not just ecologically, but just practicality, the new preferred power method is natural gas. All right, well, that's going to actually finish us up with our fossil fuels. So we've gone through coal, oil, and natural gas, and that's going to hopefully set us up strong for performance on exam number 2. This exam, although I haven't started to put it together yet, I have the questions written. I know that we had done the Blue Book exam in the last round. The biggest problem is I have yet to have a single student pick those exams up, or pick up their exam. So what we'll see is I'm probably going to figure out a way to do it digitally, but I need to talk to the testing center. Either way, it's going to be at the testing center. It's going to be your only class chore for week 10, which is the week prior to spring break. So just like we saw with the previous exam, that was the chore for the week. So I'll have the exam stuff set up. I'll have some emails coming out pretty quickly, and we'll all be ready for that exam. You're probably going to write it on computers in the testing center. We'll see exactly how that shakes out, and I'll make sure that that's communicated really clearly. All right. Well, see you after spring break. Oh my gosh. All right. Bye.